They say you need a lot of patience to be a gardener, and while that's often true, sometimes plants can surprise you. These rock and alpine beds that I made back at the end of February, just 4 months ago, are looking absolutely sensational. Then there seemed to be a collection of timber coffins covered in gravel with a few tiny plants. But now, thanks to the foaming yellow of Janista Lydia tumbling over that front edge, these pinks, which seem to be able to cope with almost any weather, and a lovely little alpine called Ithionima Worley Rose, the whole lot has been brightened up. It does your heart good to look at it just 4 months on. But even so, when there's a downpour, you need to get out of it. People do say, you know, if you're filming every week, what do you do when it's raining? Answer, get wet. Except I'm fed up with getting wet every blooming Friday. But it does mean if you've got a greenhouse, you can come into it, escape the wet weather, and find all manner of jobs that need doing. But one of the most pleasurable is propagation, making more plants for virtually no money at all. And some plants, like this fern, make it incredibly easy for you. This is a Splenium bulbiferum, a feathery fronded fern. It's a little bit tender, so I keep it in my cool conservatory. And if you look at the elder fronds, you'll see that they're covered in tiny little plantlets. Now each of these is capable of becoming a new one, and all you need to do with these is to nip them off individually and give them a place of their own. You really feel a fraud when you're doing this kind of propagation because there's virtually nothing to it. Just make a little miniature trench in the surface of the compost to bury that old bit of frond. Take your little plantlet with that piece of older frond that's attached to it. You'll be almost as clumsy as you like. Tap it, and there you can see that tuft of new little leaves or fronds sticking out. And then water it in, and either put it into a polythene bag or use one of these dinky little old-fashioned bell jars. You can buy these nowadays. This keeps the little plant in what the Victorians used to call a close atmosphere. Keep an eye on it to make sure it doesn't get dry. As soon as it starts to grow away, take off the dome. Hey presto, you've got a new plant. That's the easy way of propagation. Some methods are not nearly so obvious and a bit more tricky. Take streptocarpus, the Cape primrose. Cracking plant for a greenhouse, just beginning to come into flower now with me, and they'll bloom on right the way through the summer. You get little succulent beauties like this one, Streptocarpus saxorum. Incredibly dainty flowers on fuse wire thin stems of this ethereal shade of lavender blue. But the beefier ones with leaves like cows' tongues are the ones that most people grow, and you can make a heck of a lot of them by removing just one leaf. Cut it off right at the bottom. Now you can, if you want, use that as one cutting, dipping the cut base into a pot of cuttings compost and you'll get a plant. But you can get more out of it. What you need to do is to slice up the leaf into sections. Now it's very important that you keep these the right way around so that you know which is top and bottom. They're about 1.5 inches long, and I'm getting out of this one 6 pieces of leaf, which will give me 6 plants. What I need to do now is to dip them into cuttings compost. Little half tray, start with the tip and keep the cut edges that were at the bottom of the leaf the right way around so that they go into the compost. Do not turn them upside down or they won't root. You just need to arrange them, rather like tombstones. If you drop them on the floor and you're not quite sure, just remember that the veins are running upwards. When it comes to the last one, that can just sit in that corner there, pushed in by its stalk. Now, when it comes to Streptocarpus saxorum, this little beauty, you can see that its leaves are quite succulent. No point in slicing those up. Just peel one off quite carefully and pop them individually into there so that just the bottom quarter is buried. Now it's a bit of a shock for a plant being chopped into bits like this, so to get these to root you need to give them a bit of tender loving care. A propagating case will give them just the atmosphere they want. You can use just a polythene bag on a warm windowsill if you want. This is heated. I'm going to water them in just to settle the compost around them, but not keep them too wet. Try not to keep those hairy leaves soggy either. That compost wants to stay damp but not soggy to get them to root. Then I can pull the lid down, stand well back and wait for little plants to appear from the bottom of each one, and also wait for pests to appear. Whitefly loves streptocarpus, and at this time of year, when the weather's mild and there's still quite a few showers about, pests are thriving, as Pippa Greenwood is discovering on the vegetable plot.
This week I've abandoned my own kitchen garden and come to visit some allotments at Hadley in Hampshire. Now that everything's really moving into growth, you can be sure that the pests and diseases are going to be having a field day as well. So who better to show me around the allotments and tell me about the local problems than Brian Booker, the Allotment Society's treasurer. There's no doubt about it, I'm afraid most of this garlic in these blocks here has got virus. The yellow streaking on the leaves and the sort of distortion is typical.
Yes.
Did you get this from a seed catalogue or...?
These three, yes.
And what about these ones?
And those three from a supermarket.
Oh, I thought you might have done that. Problem is, it might be a lot cheaper, but if you get them from a supermarket, the chances are they've got a bit of virus in them.
Right.
And then you're just not going to get the crop you wanted, and the chances are they get virus as well.
No.
But whatever you do, please don't save any of these cloves for planting next year.
Right.
A bit of extra cost at the beginning is well worth it. At first sight, these may look like a fabulous few rows of potatoes, but I've managed to find a bacterial problem lurking here. It's called blackleg, and if you pull one of the haulms out, you can see just why. The base of the stem goes black and shrinks inwards. Quite often, the whole plant dies before you even get a decent crop. Now, you get it from planting infected tubers, which often look perfectly normal. It's spread in wet weather, but it's really important to lift something like this as soon as you can. Unfortunately, there aren't any really resistant varieties available, but you certainly want to try avoiding things like Estima and Arran Pilot and Desiree, because those are particularly prone. Something else I've spotted is an abandoned celery plant, but this time the blotches on the leaves are not due to a disease, but a pest, the celery leaf mining fly. She lays her egg in the leaf that hatches out into a tiny maggot-like creature which eats its way within the leaf and then hatches out and flies away, but meanwhile it kills off a lot of leaf, and that means you're likely to get thin, spindly stalks, often with a bitter taste, so it is worth doing something about it. Either tear off the infested parts of the leaf, or if you're not too squeamish, just go round and squidge them so that you squash that maggot and stop it doing any more damage.
I'm used to having to get rid of pests on my plants, but not having to get rid of flowers. But if I want my tuberous begonias to bloom for that show at the beginning of September, I've got to remove all these flower buds until 35 days before the show, as per Colin Nicklin, Secretary of National Begonia Society's instructions. I've also got to pot them on because they're really growing fiercely well. I'll tell you, in here, it's like a little shop of horrors. They just don't seem to stop growing, but then I guess that's the way to win prizes. And Colin reckoned I needed to pot them up into something just slightly larger as soon as the roots were beginning to come out the bottom of the pot. But what he also said was that each plant, because I haven't got 3 or 4 stems to enter the multi-stemmed class, I'm going to have to enter the single-stemmed class. And this plant, which at the moment has 2 stems, is going to need one of them removing. And obviously, that's this one here, on your right, the weaker of the 2. And the way to get it off is to scrape away the compost with your finger and then cut it off with a knife as close to the tuber as possible. Now I'll hang on to him, I won't throw him away, and I'll come back to him a bit later on. But first, I'm going to turn my attention to this chap. Big, beefy, party dress. You poor fella being numbered with a name like that. He needs a pot about an inch larger in diameter. And this is it. That should do him nicely. That sits in there, as you can see, with a bit of room to spare all the way around, about ½ an inch all the way around. And that's a big enough move. Decent sized drainage hole in the bottom. Good weighty pot to hold my prize-winning begonia upright. And in the bottom over that hole, lumps of crock, broken flower pot. Stop it being bunged up by the compost. Now, if you've ever grown begonias before, you'll know they hate being soggy at the root. It causes the blooms to drop. If they're dry at the root, it causes the blooms to drop. So good drainage and the right compost are vital. Now, Colin Nicklin reckons if you use Johnny's number 2 on its own, it can be a bit claggy, a bit badly drained. So he mixes it in equal parts with this soilless multi-purpose compost, and the combination of the two produces the perfect growing medium. Now, I won't need much of this in the bottom of this pot because that one is quite deep. This is the nerve-wracking moment. I'm going to try and get it out without damaging the plant. A quick tap on there. Yep, just freed it. No need to worry about the compost that's falling out. Take that out of there. And without that falling to bits, pop it into there. Oh, look at that, what a relief. See the relief written all over his face. Prize-winning days are not yet over. And then, checking it's central, because I bet they're picky about things like that. Holding it up, I'm going to ease this down the side. Slipping the compost between pot and root ball, and then lightly firming it with the fingers. When you've finished potting up something like this, you've got to remember to allow room for watering on the surface of the compost. There's just over an inch there of gap between compost and rim, which should allow for a good watering. And am I relieved that that went there in one piece? Can go back into the greenhouse now and grow on, while I turn my attention to this little fella here. Now, he'll make a really good cutting, potentially a new plant, but there's too much leaf on there. He'll lose far too much water through those, so I want to get rid of some of them. I can just snap off this lower one here and snap off this one as well, which is another big one. That leaves me with one partially developed leaf right in the centre and another fully expanded one. What I want to do now, hold your breath, is to reduce this one by half, just slicing through it with my knife. And that means you lose far less moisture, and that is a suitable cutting for treatment. With a little piece of parent tuber attached to the bottom, they always root much more easily. In what? In a mixture of the soilless compost and this sharp sand. It's the sort that almost cuts your fingers when you squeeze it, and it gives really good drainage to this soilless compost. Mix it in, and you'll know you've got enough in there when it starts to feel crunchy in your hands. Then take, in this case, a 4-inch plastic pot, fill it up with that mixture, really lightly firm it, not very much at all, quick tap, and then with your finger make a hole for the cutting. And slip that cutting in so it's buried for about 2 inches, lightly firm it, tap it. That can be watered in now and popped in the propagator to keep me streptocarpus company. And when it's rooted and grown on, I'll pot it on and the cycle continues. Now, the begonia may be my flower at the moment, but this week's flower at the moment is something completely different. And Rupert Bulby is a man who really knows his onions.
Alliums fascinate me because of the enormous range that they offer. There are about 800 different species. They vary in height between 2 inches and 6 feet, and they have every colour you can think of. There are tall drumsticks, and most of those come from Central Asia or the Middle East. Mostly each individual flower is very small, but they're in tight, compact balls on the top of the stem. When you go west to southern Europe and through to America, you get much smaller species that tend to have looser heads and not be so compact. Up in Siberia, you get what we know as the garden chives. They mostly grow in milder conditions, somewhere where there's a bit more moisture and where they don't get baked dry in the summer. Allium Purple Sensation has round, reasonably compact heads of deep purple flowers. It shouldn't be forced in a greenhouse because that'll lose its rich colour, but left alone in the border in a sunny position, it is a very imposing plant. There is debate as to whether Allium seculum subspecies bulgaricum is an allium or a nectaroscordum. It has these delightful hanging bell-shaped flowers which start when they're in bud pointing upwards. As the flower opens, they turn and hang down. Allium carotaviense has not only attractive flowers, but also the leaves, which on a lot of alliums die back when they're flowering, stay looking good and promising. They are very good for the front of a sunny border. The one thing you've got to be careful about is not to feed them too much, especially the drumsticks. If you give them too much fertilizer, they'll get indigestion, produce lovely leaves, and not flower for you.
You'd think, wouldn't you, that I was in the heart of the country, but in fact I'm about a mile from Fulham's football ground and only 8 miles from Heathrow Airport. This is the stunning new Wetland Centre in Barnes, southwest London, created by the Wildfowl and Wetland Trust out of 4 disused concrete reservoirs and opened to the public just a couple of weeks ago. Centres like this are the Trust's response to the fact that our natural wetland environments are disappearing fast, taking with them the biodiversity they support. But creating sanctuaries is only one way of helping to conserve wetlands and the wildlife they sustain. We gardeners also have a part to play. To show that it's possible to be environmentally friendly, encourage biodiversity and still have a stunning garden, Gardeners World teamed up with the Wildfowl and Wetlands Trust in the spring of 1999 and invited 3 top garden design teams to create permanent gardens here. Doug Hullier is the Trust's Director of Conservation. The brief?
It's about how we use water, it's how we look after the soil, it's how we think about wildlife in the garden, it's how we think about how we use resources as well, like peat. We believe that we can bring style and good environmental practice together in the one site, and that's really what we're trying to do here.
Each design team was allocated a medium-sized plot and given a slightly different brief. Garden designer Cleve West and sculptor Johnny Woodford create some of Britain's most bold and sculptural gardens, designed with conservation in mind. So when the Wildfowl and Wetlands Trust wanted one garden to focus on water saving, they were an obvious choice to make an exciting modern statement. What about that huge green tank over there? What's that for?
We're going to sink this tank into the ground to collect the rainwater. Have I talked about the wedges? We've got these big steel wedges,
Right.
which are going to collect rainwater, send it into the tank, which can then be used for irrigation. Most of this planting is going to be drought tolerant, so I suspect we'll just be watering the trees. And it's really to show people that they can actually collect rainwater and use it in an energy efficient way.
Yeah.
The shapes that Johnny has used in his sculpture and furniture, I think, has rubbed off on me in some of the design aspects. Whereas before I probably would have been a bit frightened to use spiky shapes. I'm more confident about that now.
So Johnny, what about this lovely curving boundary?
For me, it's far more dynamic than to have a straight line.
Yeah.
And we try to avoid perfectly straight lines in the garden. We were looking for a fanned effect, so the eye follows around the garden, and it's quite a sort of an active fence.
Yeah, yeah. And what about the wedge shapes? You've got sort of the 2.
Yeah, the idea with these is this one in particular, sort of is forcing its way into the garden, exploding its way into the garden.
Yeah.
And it's breaking the space up.
What about the materials you're using?
All the sleepers are from Africa, and it's Eki and Oroko.
Right. But all recycled?
All recycled. There's some more sculptural elements to come in, and they're Brighton's diseased elms that have had to be cut down.
Right. What are you using the elm for?
There's some seating and there's some blue spikes, 81 blue spikes to go up.
Oh, yes. Very aggressive.
Yeah.
Why did you want to do that?
Well, the spikes accentuate the precarious lean of the fence, so it adds to that the sort of unnerving feel. We also wanted the spikes to look like they could just slam down at any moment.
What about the colour scheme?
Blue, silver and black, they're colours I've been working with, and I know I like them and Cleve likes them, so we went with that.
Yeah. And how's that going to tone in with the planting?
Well, the planting might have to tone in with it.
1 year later, Cleve and Johnny have created a garden that combines strong sculptural elements with equally strong architectural planting. How successful have the water-saving features been, do you think?
Well, I'm quite pleased with it, considering we had to take the water up a bit higher to so that the public could see the water.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very pleased.
And that's going into that huge tank that you buried?
Yeah, and we've disguised it with the stainless steel and the grasses.
And that then gets pumped back out again to irrigate?
Yeah, it's a solar-powered pump that sends it back up to the wedges, yeah.
What about the reed bed over there? How does that work exactly?
Well, we're trying to imitate grey water coming from the house. Instead, we've taken water from the stream that's running through here. And the water would then go through 3 sort of terraces, almost like a rice paddy field. And in theory, it cleans the water from the house, and by the time it reaches the bottom, it'll be virtually clear.
Yeah.
And that's Phragmites australis, which is a good breed to use.
Right. What about the choice of plants down at the waterside there? What dictated that?
Well, I wanted bold clumps again, and it's difficult in water planting to see any form, so I wanted to use these Juncus effusis, which really sort of are quite striking amongst the muddle of the rest of it. And there's underplanting of water mint, which is like a purple colour. So they should stand out quite well, as do these well, the yuccas will do in a couple of years' time. They'll be quite big.
I'm picking my way through the yucca minefield to the top of the garden. Very good vantage point up here, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a good
View of
view.
the garden, yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
So how do you think the planting's standing up to your sculptures?
Very well. Obviously, like what Cleve plants, and they're big, bold plants, and they complement the sculptural work as well.
I love the bench. It's really nice. A bit dangerous looking.
A bit threatening,
Yeah, just a bit.
but hopefully humorous and comfortable.
Yeah, it is actually. It's very
Good,
comfy,
yeah.
isn't it? Yeah.
Whatever the weather this weekend, try and find a plant appropriate to the occasion. Saxifraga, tumbling waters. Ta-da.
There's more practical advice and inspirational ideas on the way next here on UKTV Gardens as we head into the ever-popular gardener's world. So stay with us.